Bernardo Raul Castro Mata, the Venezuelan migrant, came face to face with the judge this morning. Now, he made a shocking confession to authorities, saying that he is a member of the vicious Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, and that gang is smuggling firearms into migrant shelters.
So apparently there are now weapons and gang members inside some of the city's shelters for asylum seekers, like this one right here, which creates a dangerous environment not just for those inside these controversial facilities, but also for everyone out on the streets of this city, where police say their battle with a notorious, dangerous gang is just getting started.
They're waving the guns around.
Correct.
Waving guns and flashing gang signs on this video. The NYPD says these are suspected members of the ruthless Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, which has been infiltrating the U.S. for the last 2 years.
Take a closer look. Surveillance video shows a man toting a gun. He's demanding customers here to hand over their watches and wallets. You can see the customers give up their belongings.
There's not much you could do when you got a gun near you.
We feel generally very safe, so it's a bit of a surprise.
It was shocking. The way that this young self-proclaimed gang member gave up the info on his fellow gang members about the tattoos, how to identify them, the practices in Venezuela, why they shoot at the cops.
But the most shocking claim, the gang has been smuggling guns into city-run shelters.
Tren de Aragua members are smuggling firearms into city shelters inside food delivery packages. That way they'll have to go through the metal detector.
It is believed this video was made while the gang members were in Ecuador, and its purpose is to recruit new members.
Then, when you fast forward, you see the same individuals where? In Times Square. So that's our concern.
New York's shelter system is now under scrutiny after claims of weapons being smuggled inside. And although critics are gonna say this is an I told you so moment, what nobody's talking about is that this doesn't just prove New York is a sanctuary for immigrants, it's also a sanctuary for those who wish to live a life of crime. Because why on earth is it that New York has been selected by these gangs as the training ground for their new and growing US-based army of operatives? Certainly it can't be the weather that's brought these thugs to New York, with the intent of stealing and committing violence against not just the people of this city or other asylum seekers, but also its police force, who's trying to do its best to protect everyone here while dealing not just with militant gang members, but also a militant legal system, which protects those very same crooks after the police do their job and make an arrest. And critics say that right there is the real reason why we've now got a gang problem inside some of the shelters, because although 200,000 people, more than that, have come here seeking asylum, a small minority are able to work the system in their favor. Because this is a state with laws that mandate every criminal who steals or commits a low-level assault get released after they're arrested and let back out on the streets to continue their lives of crime, just so our progressive judges and politicians can sleep peacefully at night, knowing that nobody's gonna have a criminal record on their watch. But at the same time, moped-related robberies are up, attacks on police are up, and everyone in charge of stopping this wave of violence says it's bigger than any of us realize. Because that's what the latest gang member to attack the police told them. So here we have the Roosevelt Hotel, a 1,000-room shelter that also serves as the arrival welcome center for people who just came to the city. And it's full of caseworkers and aides to help people file claims for asylum. But according to testimony from one recently arrested gang member, places like this could also be serving another, deeper, darker purpose.
Bernardo Raul Castro Mata, the Venezuelan migrant, came face to face with the judge this morning. Now, he made a shocking confession to authorities, saying that he is a member of the vicious Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, and that gang is smuggling firearms into migrant shelters.
So the gentleman in this story was arrested for attacking police with a firearm after they were trying to arrest him for doing something else, which was riding his moped the wrong direction down a one-way street, which in New York, which is full of people, is very dangerous. Now, the police have been going after moped-related traffic violations because they say it's ground zero in the fight against gang-related purse and watch snatchings. And although progressive experts say cracking down on minor crimes is bad for society, police say it helps them find and arrest dangerous criminals who also commit other crimes. Which is exactly what happened when the gang member in question was captured by these two heroic officers. But what's truly frightening are the detailed revelations he gave to authorities about how he was able to obtain weapons and how weapons are proliferating throughout the shelter system in New York.
He told cops he worked for DoorDash and received the gun from a friend.
Trende Aragua members are smuggling firearms into city shelters inside food delivery packages. That way they'll have to go through the metal detector.
On June 3rd, 2 NYPD officers attempted to pull...
So if you look at the shelter behind me, the place is crawling with security. There's a metal police barricade out front. There are several people keeping an eye on the door, and you can't get in or out of this facility without an ID that says you're allowed to live here. It seems very secure. I'm sure they've got cameras pretty much everywhere else, and there's often a police presence in front of this very same building, but that hasn't been enough to stop the flow of weapons for some reason. And that's apparently because the security here is rather lax, even though it looks rather tough. And apparently getting inside here is easier than getting through a TSA checkpoint and getting on an airplane where they scan everything. And if you try to get on an airplane with a bottle of water, they are gonna test that water to see what's in it and make sure that it's actually water. But apparently people have been able to bring food or whatever they want in here. They're only checking people. They're not checking pizza boxes or burrito bowls, which is apparently how gang members have been smuggling weapons into facilities just like this. But before we get into how bad this problem is and why critics are saying it's an existential threat to the city, it's important to understand that these shelters, the more we learn about them, from the food that's being served that makes the people inside sick, to the gangs that are now seemingly operating with impunity while inside them, all of this makes it look like these places, which are shelters, they're supposed to rehabilitate people so that those people can live normal lives. It makes it look like they're failing in that mission and that they may never accomplish it. On top of that, the shelter system here is so overcrowded that people are evicted after 30 days for single adults and 60 days for families, which means not only are these places failing in their mission to help the less fortunate, they now have to accomplish that mission in as little as 30 days in some cases. And now we're learning that the gangs that may be operating in facilities just like this all over town are some of the worst, not just in America, but in the entire world.
In court this morning, the ADA says Mata also said that shooting at police officers is what they do in his home country.
It is common practice for Trende Aragua gang members to shoot at police officers because Venezuelan police officers shoot at gang members for minor infractions. Venezuelan police officers get shot often in my home country because criminals feel there is a chance of getting away.
He was once...
Right, so we're not just talking about a merry band of robbers who are stealing from the rich to feed the poor. That's not what's going on here. And apparently these gangs operate with a code of violence their members are forced to adhere to. And unfortunately, these criminals have found a recruitment goldmine in the city's shelter system, which have housed hundreds of thousands of people, many of whom came here seeking a better life and job opportunities. Opportunities critics say they were not dissuaded from believing in as they checked into these very same facilities. But sadly, the situation now is such that if you go by many of these places, you'll see people hanging out all day with really nothing to do. They're not here accomplishing the purpose that they set out to accomplish, and that's gotta be frustrating. But it's not an excuse for criminal activity. But even though the crime we're learning about is due to the actions of just a small minority of people, police have discovered something much more frightening than anything we've discussed so far as part of their investigation into what these gangs are really up to. Something's going on over here. All these police just came charging out of this door right over here in the back of the bus terminal. Regardless, the new challenge facing New York's finest is different than anything they've ever had to deal with in the past, that's for sure.
They're waving the guns around.
Correct.
Waving guns and flashing gang signs on this video. The NYPD says these are suspected members of the ruthless Venezuelan gang Trende Aragua, which has been infiltrating the U.S. for the last 2 years. NYPD assistant.
So the police have been working overtime to investigate this particular gang and learn how they're potentially using the asylum crisis as cover for their operations. Recent reports say the gang is intent on expanding its operations in the city because of our lax justice system, which make the streets of New York the perfect place to bring in green criminals and put them through a training program of sorts, because they can do a whole bunch of things wrong here and never really get punished for it as long as it's not too egregious. Think about it. Where else can you ride your little moped up to a group of people eating on the sidewalk and rob them and get away? This happened 3 times in Williamsburg, Brooklyn last week. And although we don't know who the assailants were as they were wearing motorcycle helmets, it doesn't take an idiot to see that this is an environment criminals of all backgrounds could favor. But the idea of gang members potentially robbing restaurant patrons isn't even the worst part about all this. The scary part about all this is what police found in the online videos they discovered relating to this gang's activities.
It is believed believe this video was made while the gang members were in Ecuador, and its purpose is to recruit new members.
Then, when you fast forward, you see the same individuals where? In Times Square. So that's our concern.
The NYPD says Tren de Aragua has been making it over the border with the migrant influx and is getting established in New York.
What we do.
Yeah, this is like a promotional video from a travel agency catering to criminals who want to do something wrong. In one moment, these guys are dancing around with guns in another country, and then the next moment, they're in the middle of Times Square. They're essentially saying, just get on a bus, come to New York, join us. By the way, did you know that Times Square is a gun-free zone? That's where they filmed this. And even though this video was filmed in Ecuador, Venezuela, where the gang claims to be from, is also a gun-free country. You're not allowed to own firearms there unless you're in the military or the police force. And of course, the shelters are supposed to be gun-free zones as well. That's why pizza boxes and takeout bags are being used to smuggle things from outside the shelters to inside the shelters. Yet none of that seems to matter to the criminals that are here, flouting our laws, violating them every chance they get. What's also pretty crazy is New York City's laws aren't helping the whole firearm situation either, because even though getting caught with a weapon on our streets is a 3.5-year minimum penalty, oftentimes the DA drops or downgrades those charges, which means many times criminals who are arrested and are on camera carrying a weapon get released. It's tough to think that that's not something a gang wouldn't find to their advantage.
The gang has gone from petty crimes like shoplifting and stealing cell phones and jewelry to all-out shootouts in the streets. Alleged gang.
Yet we keep hearing from some circles that the city is safer than it's ever been, that crime is down, and that this is all just overblown hyperbole in spite of the news reports and the evidence and the real people's lives who are negatively affected by this. Although in defense of that viewpoint, one reason crime could be down could be that a lot of this crime is gang related, and gang members don't really have a habit of filing police reports and meeting with authorities in order to investigate their own actions. And if there are less reported crimes, there are less statistics, and crime will look like it's down. And the other problem facing the city is that when somebody does get arrested for doing something really bad and the DA drops or downgrades those charges, instead of now being charged with assault and weapon possession, they're just charged with some sort of misdemeanor, essentially letting our criminals off the hook before they face justice. It's the same story when people end up attacking the police. This happens all the time, doesn't even matter the person's background. And both our homegrown criminals and criminals trying to take advantage of our safety net now know no consequences come with crime.
The gang violence is escalating, and now drugs are coming into the picture. It seems like this is a huge challenge.
It's as big of a challenge as we faced.
The NYPD has faced difficult challenges in the past and is determined.
So it's not just crime, it's not just violence. Now there are substances coming into the picture. We've already got enough of a problem with that in our country. And think of how bad this is for absolutely everyone. Can you imagine spending months coming to this country thinking your best days are ahead of you, and then when you finally get here, you check into a shelter and find out that the same gangs you fled from in your home country are controlling that shelter, making our city no better than the environments these criminals have come from. Now again, everyone understands that the criminals we're talking about here, they aren't the majority, but it only takes a small number of people to have a big impact in a very bad way. Hence the claims of a potential national security threat existing at this very moment in time. But what's crazy is the exact type of security we're seeing at the border is the same security we're seeing inside of our shelters, which explains why a pepperoni pizza might be hiding something other than too many calories on its way in. But it gets even worse, because you know what the individual in our first story was doing as a legitimate form of income? Wait till you hear this.
We did reach out to DoorDash. They just got back to us saying that they have no record of anyone by that name working for DoorDash. That's
so apparently this individual was working for DoorDash, but DoorDash says they had no idea he was working for them. What sense does that make? And does it mean that the next time you get a delivery in New York, the person who delivers your food might not actually be the person DoorDash thinks it is? That in and of itself is quite concerning, because what it means is that these app delivery companies aren't doing a good job of vetting who's on their platform either. Of course, they say they have a vetting process, they say they have a way to keep their customers safe, but is that really the case if these types of folks are out there making deliveries to apartments all over town? But if you think DoorDash is doing a pretty bad job with its security, or is doing the best it can in spite of circumstances that dictate otherwise, wait till you hear the city's excuse for how these weapons are winding up inside the shelters.
Now, today I also reached out to City Hall about security and metal detectors at the city-run migrant shelters, and I asked them why food containers are not being screened for possible weapons. Now, I was told those items are supposed to be screened every single time, and now the city is now retraining security personnel at all city-run migrant shelters.
So after these allegations reports come out, the city realizes that they didn't properly train their super expensive private security at these facilities to check the food. What's incredible about that statement is some of these shelters, like the gigantic tent facilities, cost $20 million a month to operate, yet the people operating them aren't properly trained to keep the people inside safe who want to obey the law. But at least now the city says they're going to retrain all of its security. But what that actually means is this wasn't an isolated incident. Every shelter in town, they're all potentially affected by what we're learning about today. It's not good. And critics are gonna say all this is doing is shedding more light on how mismanaged this whole process is and how it needs to change. Yet at the exact same time, thousands of people still come to New York City every single week from the southern border, and they need a place to stay, which means that the asylum crisis in the city isn't going away anytime soon, in spite of its imperfections. Which means the real question in front of everyone in New York City is, how do we get the shelter system under control and make it safe for the very people who are in it and who need help to live normal lives and get back on their feet, which is the purpose these shelters are supposed to accomplish in the first place. How would you go about doing that? Let me know what you think about this new tale of organized crime taking over our city. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.